I just found out my wife's affair with her stole us $250, $0 from our home equity, and she's now suing me for half the estate. I thought I knew her, but I'm trapped in a nightmare of betrayal and greed. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. But here I am. The most unexpected moment hit me like a ton of bricks. Turns out my wife, Lisa, who I thought was the love of my life, was sleeping with her, and she'd managed to drain our entire savings to fund her affair. I mean, she stole $250, $0 from our home equity, and now she's actually suing me for half the estate. It's like I woke up in some nightmare I can't wake up from. I want to tell the whole story from the beginning, because honestly I still can't believe how badly I was played. Lisa and I had been together for over 10 years. We got married young, built a life, bought a house, had 2 kids. I thought we were solid even if we had our usual ups and downs. She was always a little bitchy, quick to throw tantrums, but I thought that was just her personality. She was smart, beautiful, and ambitious. She worked her way up in this marketing firm, always talking about her future, about climbing the corporate ladder, about how she wanted more out of life. I was proud of her, proud to be her husband. But lately things had changed. Small things at first. She was more secretive with her phone, hiding her screen when I walked into the room, deleting messages, staying late at work more often. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed or working extra hours, but it didn't sit right. I started noticing her behaving differently. She was more irritable, snapping at me over nothing, and her phone started disappearing more often. I'd catch her lying about where she was going or who she was talking to. One day, I decided to check her phone. I know, it's invasive, but I was just desperate to find some peace of mind. I unlocked her device, and that's when I saw it: texts, explicit messages, even pictures of her in bed with someone. The name was Mike, her. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. I read through everything, and it was worse than I imagined. They'd been sleeping together for months. She had planned this entire thing, and I was just too blind or too trusting to see it. I confronted her that night. I was furious, trembling with rage and heartbreak. I told her I knew everything. Her face twisted in that bitchy smirk she always wears when she's trying to dismiss something. She looked at me and lied right to my face, saying I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that she'd never cheat on me. She accused me of snooping, of not trusting her, and started crying. Those fake tears she uses to manipulate people. She told me I was overreacting, that I was making up stories, that I was jealous. But I knew the truth, and I saw her for what she really was. The emotional impact hit me hard. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The woman I loved, the woman I married, was lying, cheating, stealing from us, our savings, our future, everything. She drained our home equity, took out loans, and used the money to fund her affair. I couldn't believe she'd go that far, that she'd risk everything for her selfish needs. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. How could she do this to me? How could she betray our vows, our family? I was shattered. But what hurt even more was realizing she had no remorse. Instead of feeling guilty, she was defensive, trying to gaslight me into doubting my own judgment. She said I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that she'd never cheat. Then she accused me of being insecure and controlling. I knew better. I saw the messages, the pictures, the receipts. She was lying, and I was just too blind to see it. After that night, everything changed. I started digging deeper, checking bank statements, looking into her emails. I found out she had taken out a second mortgage on our house, without my knowledge, to fund her affair. She used our savings, took out loans, even maxed out our credit cards, all to keep her affair alive. The money is gone, our house is now heavily mortgaged, and she's even suing me for half the estate, claiming she's entitled because she's contributed to the house. The whole thing feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. I don't even recognize the woman I married anymore. She's manipulative, greedy, and completely unfaithful. I keep asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let her get away with this for so long. It's like I was living in a bubble and now everything's burst. I don't know what's worse, the betrayal itself or the fact that she's now fighting me in court, trying to take half of what little I have left. I thought I knew her, but I was so wrong. This is my story, and I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward from this nightmare she created. After discovering everything, I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind was racing, trying to process how someone I loved and trusted could do this to me, to our family. I spent the first few days in a fog, angry, hurt, confused. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that smug look she gives when she's lying through her teeth. I kept replaying the moments when I should have seen the signs, but I was too blind, too trusting. Now all I saw was betrayal in every corner. The first thing I did was confront her again. I told her I knew everything about the affair, the money, the loans, everything. She had all, of course. She said I was paranoid, that I was making up stories because I was jealous or insecure. Her voice was cold and dismissive. She told me I was overreacting, that she loved me, and that I was crazy for even thinking she could cheat. She said I was controlling, that I didn't trust her, and that I was ruining everything with my accusations. But I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, emails, and I laid it all out on the table. She scoffed at the evidence, called it misunderstandings, and then turned it around on me. She accused me of invading her privacy, of spying on her, and said I destroyed our marriage with my paranoia. I was furious. I told her I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her I'd found out she'd taken out a second mortgage on our house, something I never agreed to, and that she'd borrowed money from friends and even her boss, all to keep her affair going. It was like she was trying to drain us dry, while pretending to be innocent. I felt so many things at once: anger, sadness, disgust. I was furious at her betrayal, but I also felt utterly crushed. How could she do this to us, to our children? I thought I knew her, but every moment I spent with her now felt like I was living with a stranger. And the worst part, she didn't care. Not really. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was the one ruining her life, that I was the one who was paranoid and controlling. She even told me I was lucky she was still with me after everything she'd done. That's when I realized she was fully committed to her lies and her greed. Over the next few days, I started digging into her financials more. I found out she'd been secretly transferring money to her sister, hiding receipts, and even using cash to cover her tracks. She'd been living a double life, pretending to be this devoted wife and mother, while secretly planning her escape. The house we built, the money we saved, she was draining it all. I found bank statements showing she'd borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she was now suing me for half the estate, claiming she contributed just as much as I did. That was the last straw. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her keep destroying everything we had. I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to understand my options. The lawyer told me that she was likely going to try and take half the house, claiming she had a right to it because she'd contributed to the mortgage, except she hadn't, not really. She'd been living off our equity, borrowing against the house, and using our combined income to fund her affair. It was clear she was planning to leave me with nothing. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day felt like I was walking through a minefield. I was angry at her for lying, for betraying me, for stealing from us. I was angry at myself for not noticing sooner. I felt betrayed by the woman I thought I knew, and I was furious that she was now trying to take everything from me. The worst part was the betrayal's aftermath, knowing she had used me and our home as a piggy bank for her own selfish needs. I started questioning everything. Was I naive? Did I miss the signs? Did I love her too much? I kept replaying the good times, trying to find some meaning, some reason she'd do this. But there was none, only greed and betrayal. Every time I thought about her, I felt a mixture of rage and deep sadness. I couldn't believe I had trusted her for so long, only to find out she'd been lying and cheating behind my back. The betrayal cut so deep, I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. As I sat there, staring at the mounting evidence, I realized I had a choice. I could fight or I could give up. I decided I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I would fight for what was mine, what we had built. I was determined to protect my rights, to stop her from taking half of everything I'd worked for. But honestly, I didn't know how this was going to end. I just knew I couldn't keep living in this nightmare of betrayal and greed. I needed to find a way out, one that didn't leave me completely broken, After I got the legal advice, everything changed. I realized she was serious about taking half the estate, and her suing me was just the beginning. The woman I once thought was my partner suddenly turned into my biggest adversary. I spent sleepless nights going over every detail, every dollar she might try to claim, and every lie she told to cover her tracks. It was like living in a war zone, and I was on the front lines trying to defend what little I had left. I started gathering my own evidence, bank statements, emails, texts, anything that could show her manipulations, her secret loans, her secret accounts. I even hired a private investigator. I didn't trust her anymore, not even to tell the truth about her own actions. The pie uncovered more than I expected. She'd been meeting Mike outside of work, staying overnight in hotels, and even had a burner phone she'd used to keep everything hidden. It was like peeling an onion, layer after layer of lies and deception. The more I found out, the more furious I became. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the sheer betrayal and greed. One day, I decided I needed to confront her directly. No more hiding, no more pretending. I didn't know. I called her into the living room, sat her down, and laid out every piece of evidence I had. I told her I knew about her affair, her loans, her plans to take everything. Her face twisted into that bitchy smirk again, and she started lying all over. She said she was just confused, that she never meant to hurt me, that it was just sex, and that Mike was just a friend. Yeah, right. She insisted she was the victim, that I'd never understood her, that I was controlling and paranoid. She said she loved me but needed something more, whatever that meant. That moment was a turning point. I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, greedy woman who'd been plotting her escape for months. She tried to make me feel guilty, crying fake tears, saying I was ruining her life and the kids' lives. But I wasn't having it. I told her she was a liar and a thief, and that I was done playing her game. I told her I was going to fight her in court, and I'd do everything I could to protect what was mine. The emotional was intense. I went from feeling rage to utter despair. I was devastated that the woman I loved could do this to me, that she would betray our vows, our family, for some stupid affair and greed. I kept thinking about the kids, about how she was risking everything for Mike, who was just some guy she met at work. I felt like I was losing my mind, and I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But I also knew I had to be strong for myself, for my kids, for what was left of our family. In the days that followed, I kept digging. I found out she'd been secretly transferring money to her sister, hiding assets, and even trying to get a loan in my name, stuff I never authorized. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she was planning to leave me with nothing. She had no intention of stopping her greed. She was just trying to cover her tracks. I felt sick at the thought of what she was capable of. She'd lied so much, manipulated everyone around her, all to get what she wanted. I decided I couldn't let her get away with it. I hired a lawyer and we started preparing for the fight. I also contacted my bank and accountant to get everything in order. I knew she'd try to claim the house, the savings, everything we owned, but I also knew I had rights. I had put my blood, sweat, and tears into that house, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with half of it just because she was greedy. I was ready to go to court, to fight her for what was rightfully mine. The most painful part was realizing how much I'd been. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I failed to see her true nature. Was I just too trusting, too in love? I guess I was, but now I saw her clearly. She was a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. And I was determined to make sure she paid for what she'd done, whether that meant losing everything or just making her regret her choices. I didn't want her to win, not after everything she'd put me through. Every day felt like a battle. I was exhausted emotionally, drained physically, but I refused to give up. I knew this fight wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, respect, and protecting what little I had left of my life. I kept telling myself I'd come out of this stronger, that I'd rebuild whatever was broken. But honestly, I was scared. Scared of losing everything, scared I'd never be able to trust again, scared I'd never feel safe in my own home. Still, I had no choice but to keep fighting. I owed it to myself and to my kids to stand tall, even if I felt like crumbling inside. The court dates kept coming closer, and every day I felt like I was walking on thin ice. Lisa, of course, was playing the victim, crying, whining about how I was ruining her life, how she deserved half the estate because she contributed to the house, and how I was just some insecure, controlling husband. She even had her lawyer file a bunch of false claims, trying to paint me as the bad guy, saying I was abusive or manipulative. It was all so predictable. She's good at spinning stories, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen through her lies, and I had enough evidence to back me up. I spent hours every day with my lawyer, going over every detail, every document, every piece of proof I had collected. We worked on building a case that showed she was acting in bad faith, draining our savings, secretly taking out loans, hiding assets, and even trying to transfer money to her sister. We had bank statements showing her withdrawals, emails where she admitted to the affair, and messages where she tried to justify her greed. It was ugly, but I knew I had to be meticulous. If I was going to fight her, I had to be prepared for everything. One day, I found out she'd been meeting with her lawyer behind my back, trying to come up with ways to hide or undervalue assets. That was the last straw. I decided I'd had enough of her manipulations. I hired my own investigator to dig into her financial records, and I told my lawyer to push for a forensic audit of all her accounts. I wanted the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I knew she was trying to play dirty, but I was determined to fight fire with fire. In the meantime, I kept my distance. Emotionally, I couldn't let her see how much she was affecting me, though honestly I was falling apart inside. Every time I saw her, I felt this mixture of hatred and heartbreak. She was still pretending to be the innocent victim, but I knew better. I knew her game. I also started talking to friends and family, trying to get support. Some of them told me to just walk away, that I'd be better off without her. Others told me to fight for what's rightfully mine. I didn't know what to believe anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't let her take everything from me. One particularly shocking discovery was her attempt to transfer the title of the house to her sister's name. She'd forged documents, trying to make it look like she was just doing some legal reorganization. But I caught it in time. My lawyer filed an injunction to stop her from doing that. I realized then just how far she was willing to go to get her way. She was playing dirty, and I had to be even dirtier to stop her. The fight was getting uglier, and I knew it wasn't going to end easily. The emotional toll was enormous. I was constantly stressed, anxious, and angry. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about everything she'd done, how she drained our savings, how she lied to my face, how she used me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and helpless. I'd loved her for so long, and now I saw her for what she truly was, a selfish, greedy woman who'd ruined everything for her own gain. The pain was overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to let it consume me. I had to stay strong for my kids, for myself. I started doing things to keep my mind busy, working late, hitting the gym, even reconnecting with old friends. I needed to remind myself that I was still me, despite everything she'd done. I also began to realize that I couldn't keep living in this constant state of anxiety and fear. I had to prepare for the worst, but I also had to hope for the best. I knew she was going to fight dirty, but I was ready for the battle. I'd come too far to back down now. The most frustrating part was her constant denial and manipulation. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of stalking her, even try to turn the kids against me. She'd tell them I was the bad guy, that I was trying to ruin her life, but I knew the truth. I had the evidence and I had the legal backing. Still, it was hard not to feel defeated sometimes. I kept asking myself, how did I get here? How did I let someone I loved turn into this monster? And more importantly, how do I get out of this mess with some shred of dignity intact? Every day I reminded myself that I was fighting for my future, for my sanity, and for my children's stability. I couldn't undo what she'd done, but I could control my response. I was learning to let go of the anger, though it still burned inside me. I had been betrayed on every level, financially, emotionally, and morally. But I refused to let her win. I was determined to stand my ground, no matter how ugly the fight became. I had to believe that justice would prevail, even if it felt like I was losing everything in the process. The court date finally arrived, and I can honestly say I've never been more nervous in My life. Standing there, facing her and her lawyer, I felt like I was in the middle of a battle I couldn't escape from. She sat there, her bitchy smirk back on her face like she thought she had already won. She was trying to look innocent, but I saw through that act. She was trying to play her victim, but I knew better now. I had all the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The courtroom was tense. My lawyer presented the mountain of proof I had gathered: bank statements, emails, texts, the forensic audit report. We showed how she drained our savings, taken out loans, forged documents, and even transferred the house's title to her sister. She tried her usual tricks, crying fake tears, claiming I was abusive or controlling. But the judge wasn't buying it. There was enough evidence to show she'd acted in bad faith, trying to cheat me out of my rightful share. Lisa's face was turning red and her lawyer was sputtering, trying to come up with some last-minute excuse. But I stayed calm. I had prepared for this. I knew she'd try to manipulate the court, twist facts, and spin her lies. I also knew I had to stay composed, even though inside I was boiling with rage. This was the moment I had fought so hard for. I was finally going to get some justice. When the judge finally made the ruling, I felt a wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. She was ordered to pay back the money she'd stolen, and the court determined she had no legal claim to the house or the savings. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees. It was a small victory, but it felt huge at the time. I had fought tooth and nail and I'd won some ground, but I knew this wasn't over yet. She was furious and I could see it in her eyes. I knew she'd try to come back with more tricks, more lies. After the court, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I'd fought for months, risking everything: my sanity, my finances, my peace of mind. And I'd come out on top, but at what cost? I'd lost my trust, my sense of security, and I'd been betrayed by the woman I loved. That pain lingered, even as I tried to move forward. I realized I'd been living in a nightmare, and even though I'd won the legal battle, the emotional scars ran deep. In the aftermath, I started to rebuild my life. I focused on my kids and tried to create a sense of normalcy for them. I moved into a smaller place, away from the chaos. I cut ties with Lisa entirely. No contact, no explanations. I couldn't let her ruin me further with her lies and manipulations. I also took time for myself: therapy, support groups, anything that could help me process what I'd been through. It was a long road, but I knew I had to heal. Looking back, I realized that I learned some hard lessons. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people closest to you can betray you in ways you never imagined. I learned to be more cautious, more aware. I also learned that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, you can find a way to fight back. Sometimes it's about standing up for yourself, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And most importantly, I learned that no matter how much you love someone, you have to protect yourself from their greed and lies. Because if you don't, they'll take everything: your money, your trust, your peace of mind, and leave you with nothing but heartbreak. I don't know what the future holds now. I still feel the sting of betrayal every day, but I also feel a strange sense of relief that I finally took back control. I can't undo what she did, but I can move forward stronger and more cautious than before. I hope this story serves as a warning. Never ignore the signs, never trust blindly, and always protect yourself. Because some people will do anything to get what they want, even if it means destroying everything you've built. Now that everything's settled, I find myself sitting here, trying to put the pieces of this mess into some kind of understanding. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this: trusting someone, building a life, only to have it all shattered by betrayal and greed. It's a harsh lesson that I wish I never had to learn, but one I'll carry with me forever. Looking back, I realize how blind I was to her true nature. I was so caught up in the idea of us, in the life I thought we had, that I ignored the warning signs. The secretive phone, the late nights, the hidden expenses, they all should have been red flags, but I convinced myself she was just stressed or busy. I was too comfortable, too trusting, and that cost me everything. If I could go back, I'd tell myself to pay closer attention, to listen to my instincts, to question more. The most painful part of this whole ordeal is how much I loved her, how I believed in us. And yet she threw all that away for some fleeting sex and greed. It's hard not to feel bitter, not to feel like I wasted years of my life on someone who was only out for herself. But I also know I have to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. Sometimes, love blinds you, and that's a harsh reality. Now, I try to focus on the future, on healing and moving on. I've learned that people can surprise you in the worst ways, and that sometimes you have to fight for what's yours, your dignity, your home, your peace of mind. I still wake up some mornings feeling the sting of betrayal, but I remind myself that I survived. I fought for my rights, my children, and my sanity. That's something no one can take away from me. Most importantly, I've come to understand that not everyone is worth your trust. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, even if it means losing someone you loved. That's a hard lesson, but it's one I've accepted. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware, and to value myself more. Because if I don't, no one will. This entire experience has changed me, made me more wary but also more resilient. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I can rebuild. I can create a new life, one where I'm in control, where I choose who to trust and how to protect myself. It's not easy and it never will be, but I'm determined. I have to be. So if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people closest to you. Stay alert, stay cautious, and never ignore the signs. Protect what's yours and don't be afraid to fight for it. Because in the end, your happiness and peace of mind are worth more than any lie or betrayal. And no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way to find the light again.